and welcome back to this i24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Arish, and this is the Daily Debate. The Lebanese militant group HEZBOLLAH announced earlier this morning that one of its senior commanders, Hassan al-Lakis, had been killed by what they believe is assassination outside his residence in Beirut. Joining me tonight is Professor Eyal Zisser, expert in Middle Eastern history at Tel Aviv University, and Yoram Schweitzer, director of the research program of terrorism and law intensity conflict at Institute for National Security Studies. Good evening, both gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to the studio. So what this recent hit means to Hezbollah, Professor Zisser?
Well, clearly Hezbollah is not new better days than today. It's part of a bigger picture. It's fighting in Lebanon, burying every day dozens, maybe hundreds of his warriors who were killed in Lebanon. Is being attacked on the regional level, and last but not least, of course, is being attacked inside Lebanon by radical Islamic Sunni groups. So it's only one of or part of a bigger picture where Hezbollah is clearly in a distress.
Hezbollah is distressed, especially, we can say, because of the recent isolation that it's in. The situation in Lebanon, the situation in Syria, which made it really isolated in the region and not really being able to, let's say, face an attack with Israel.
It's a matter of decision. Maybe the decision.
Although they're blaming Israel for this assassination.
You're talking about revenge?
Yes.
They have the capabilities. It's a matter of their decision whether to get into another clash with Israel now that they are in the quagmire in Syria. I'm not sure that they will get it. Maybe they will postpone it and will add this attack, as it is perceived by them as an act of Israel, to a later stage.
So we've been waiting, let's say, in Israel for the last 5 years, since the assassination of Ahmad Mounir, for some kind of revenge. But the revenge is not coming. We're hearing only shouts from Hassan Nasrallah. He's only talking, but he's not acting. Is it because he cannot act?
No, he's being deterred by Israel. I think this is the lesson they drew from the second Lebanon war, not to be engaged once again in such a war. And what is the pretext? I mean, how can they explain to the Lebanese public, mainly to the Shiites living in Lebanon and who support this organization, how can they explain them that they drag Lebanon into another war because they accuse Israel, because they think Israel is behind it? I mean, it's not enough. Clearly, it's not enough if they have no real proof. And if it's, killing an important, as he was, commander, it's not enough to engage in a total war in Israel. And they know that if they start playing with Israel like they did in 2006, they can find themselves in a new war, and they don't want it.
Who is this al-Lakis commander, and what do we know about him?
I will address this question and I'll go back to the previous one. Lakis is a senior Hezbollah leader from the veterans. He is a man of high authority. He was dealing with procurement for the organization. And he's among the closest entourage of Hassan Nasrallah. And I think Nasrallah is losing them one by one. And I think it is kind of a blow for him because it was done in the middle of the heartland of Hezbollah. Plus the fact that he already got beaten there by the Sunni Salafi jihadists. But I want to address the issue of the reaction of Hezbollah, the retaliation. Hezbollah, with Iran, both with Iran and separately, was trying to revenge Mounir's death several times abroad with international terrorism. The fact that they didn't succeed, thanks God, except the attack in Bulgaria, doesn't mean that they didn't try. But of course, there are other calculations, and they don't want to attack Israel directly, but indirectly abroad. This is part of their system.
Bangkok and Azerbaijan.
So this international arena is for them a playground, which they play according to the Iranian policy and according to their policy. And for them, the attempts to revenge, the efforts are the proof that they were not deterred as much as international terrorism is concerned. Of course, they have other calculations because they don't want to alienate foreign countries by attacking foreign targets in these territories. But they did try, and I think if they decide to go for revenge, this is one of the options.
So let's try to look at the bigger picture with Iran. You mentioned Iran. They just signed a treaty with Iran. How much is this treaty actually going to affect the power? And in Geneva, how much is this treaty going to affect Iran and the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah?
You're talking about the agreement or the initial agreement or draft for the nuclear issue?
Yes.
I think that since it haven't been concluded, I don't think that Hezbollah is free to operate as if Iran has already become a superpower or a state with a nuclear.
They are opening to the West. They are doing this charm attack. The West is willing to actually accept Iran in a way or another, and Hezbollah it's another, we can say that it's another hit for Hezbollah because one of the biggest allies is actually going to the other side.
This is one way to look at it. On the other side, it may and it would probably, surely, will influence Hezbollah's capabilities to operate abroad. Hezbollah inclination to operate abroad in international terrorism is not something which is inherent in the organization. It's part of their policy. If Iran is going for another direction, and we have to see whether they are going there, then it will affect Hezbollah, but not negatively, sincerely.
I think that in the long run, if indeed there is a change in Iran, and the Iranians want to change their policy, part of this change, I mean, we saw people shouting in the streets, the money should go to Tehran and not to Beirut or Gaza. I mean, if this is the change, in the long run, Hezbollah will face a serious problem because Iranians will not be ready anymore to fight for Hezbollah, to finance Hezbollah the way they did before. Also in the short run, I guess that it's not in the interest of Iran to be engaged in a conflict or to have any tension against the background of Hezbollah terrorist activity.
That maybe was in Iran's interest to send Hezbollah to fight in Syria?
Well, fighting in Syria, it's one thing. Carrying out terrorist attacks on European soil against Israel is another thing. And also, sending Hezbollah to fight in Syria was part of the strategy by Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad is not there anymore. I don't know what Rouhani and the current Iranian administration think about Syria. So there is a change. We'll have to follow it very closely, but it may eventually affect Hezbollah, no doubt about it.
So we always hear about Hezbollah in the headlines. Let's try to understand how is this organization is built. The military wing and we have the political wing. Are these two working together, or each one is doing whatever he wants?
As much as operations are concerned, they are working separately, but it's one command, one general secretary. Nasrallah knows about every operation in both fields, and he is responsible for everything, not only officially or bureaucratically, but also practically.
Even on can the military, for example, the military wing do something that the political wing won't do or won't agree on?
The political wing, the other leaders may not know about it, but Nasrallah knows everything.
How much power do they have, political power do they have in the government in Lebanon?
You mean Hezbollah?
Yes.
They have in their possession, I think, with all the coalition, they have the majority. They have a pivotal role in Lebanon, and now they are facing a crisis in the government. We have to see how the election will end. But at this stage, or at least the previous government, they had a very pivotal role and position there.
What are we going to see in the next, let's say, in the next year, in the next 2 years happening in Hezbollah?
Well, I guess that more of the same. I mean, we have to follow the following, or try and address the following question: what will happen in Syria? Because clearly the outcome of the war in Syria will affect Hezbollah. For the time being, it seems that Bashar is winning. Hezbollah may benefit from such victory and put more pressure on the Lebanese system. We have to see what might happen in Iran, and also what might happen inside Lebanon, because for the first time the Sunnis are giving fight back to Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is a state within a state. I mean, when you ask about the military wing and the political wing, I mean, it's a state within a state. I mean, the state has an army, has a political leadership, but it's the same. But for their reasons, they decided that for the time being, they prefer to stay as a state within a state with a veto power on any decision taken by the Lebanese administration. I guess that we'll see more of the same in the coming future.
I'm trying to look at the situation, and we're looking at what is happening in Tripoli, and we're seeing that Lebanon is also on the edge, and I may have to be a little bit clear on that. Maybe on the edge of a civil war. Is this going to change the situation towards Hezbollah inside the country?
First of all, I think Professor Zisser knows a lot about the history of this country. The country has always been on the edge of something. I mean, this is not a very space. So I'm not sure that they will deteriorate into a civil war, although, again, we are talking about the future, and we don't know how it's going to develop. There are many components. I think Hezbollah's interest is to prevent Lebanon from being dragged into this kind of operation. I think we have watched Nasrallah all the time trying and doing compromises in order to avoid the backlash in Lebanon. Now he is suffering the backlash of his involvement in Syria, in Lebanon, and he will try to soften the repercussions as much as he can in Lebanon. It's not in his interest, because I think Hezbollah's gained a very good position. I think the war in Syria put him back into a position where he is now being presented as a foreign occupier in Syria. Of course, Arab countries, the Sunni, more pragmatic Arab countries, do not like his involvement in Syria, and he will try to see how he can get out of it with less losses that he has already got.
Before we're finishing this discussion, do you think, we've been hearing Israel talking a lot about Iran and the Iranian threat and the Iranian nuclear issue, and for a period of time, Israel talked a lot about Nasrallah and about Hezbollah. But for the last few days and for the last few months, maybe for the last few years, we've been hearing more about Iran. Are we maybe neglecting the Hezbollah issue?
Look, Hezbollah, with all due respect to Hezbollah, and I don't underestimate its capabilities, is indeed a strong player. But Hezbollah is dependent on Iran and is dependent on Syria. And his position is weakened by these events now, and we'll have to see how the other two players are going to get out of this crisis, and it will affect immensely the way and the position of Hezbollah in the region.
I think that the border is quiet for the last 5 or actually 6 years in the end of the Second Lebanon War. It means we don't neglect, we still maintain the deterrence capability we achieved after the war.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for this discussion, and I think that we're expected to see some very interesting days in the next few days, or maybe in the next few months. For now, we're going out for a small break, a 10-minute break for an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the i24 News one-on-one. And tonight we have an interview with former head of the Mossad, Dani Yatom. Don't go anywhere. 10 minutes break, and we'll be back.